Welcome to Women of Courage. This morning I'm going to highlight a woman named Melba Weber. She happened to be my mother, and the reason I'm going to highlight her is because it's Mother's Day this week, and I thought it would be fun to talk about my mother. She wasn't as old as the women we've been talking about recently, but she was born on March the 28th of 1924, and she was raised during many turbulent years of the United States, and I thought that her story which took a great deal of courage, could be an interesting story for you to hear today. My mother was born in Provo, Utah. Her father was a fruit farmer. She learned from the very early years of her life to work very hard. She remembers being out on the farm working with her father. They lived on the hill up above Brigham Young University, and she says that her father took a great deal of time to try to teach his children that if they didn't want to have to work as hard as he had all his life, he would point down at that university and he would say, get an education. And so all of my mother's siblings, all of her brothers and sisters, got degrees, and all became teachers, actually. All going to Brigham Young University, except for my mother, who rebelled about having to stay close to home, and so she decided to attend university up at USU up in Logan, and she got her degree in home economics, which we don't call it that nowadays, but she was taught how to teach women how to be effective in their home endeavors. She was an excellent canner and actually was able to win an award from the state of Utah for her canning in 4-H and represented the state of Utah in Chicago. One year she got to go out to the Chicago area to represent Utah 4-H. I was looking at the numbers this morning of how many things that she canned. It was an incredible amount. But I left that paper upstairs, so I don't remember, but it was in the thousands of bottles of fruit that she canned and meat and other things in order to win that award. She was a strong girl and had been able to do most anything she wanted to do. All of her life she worked hard and was a happy person. When she got to be after she had started going to college, World War II broke out and America had to go to war. Before I go to that, I should say that she also lived through the Depression years. But I've heard many people say that have lived through the Depression that living on a farm, really there wasn't a lot of difference in their lifestyles as that they had. They always had to scrimp and save, and they always had to work hard. So there really wasn't a great deal of difference for people that ran farms during the Depression than before they ran the farms. So all of the young men, or most of the young men in Utah, were drafted and went to war. And women had to take over the jobs that men would do. And my mother was no different than the rest. She also had to go and leave school and take on a job so that she could help with the war effort. Her job was to blow glass radio tubes. That's what she went to do while she was working for the war effort. After the war, she went back to school and got her degree and became a certified teacher. So these are a couple of pictures of my mother when she was younger, about those years when she would have been taking her training to become a home economics teacher. I decided to be right here in this area today of the museum because she was very good at cooking, but her forte was her sewing abilities. She was a very good seamstress. When we were young, well, first of all, she met my father after he had gone to war and then served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so my mother was older when she met my father. She was in her about 27. And my mom and dad decided to get married on the very first date. They met on January 1st and they were married on April the 1st. I always thought that was quite courageous of my parents to get married on April Fool's Day. And she was teaching school in Fillmore, Utah, and my father had a dairy farm along with his father, up in a small community in Star Valley, Wyoming called Freedom. And my mother had a contract to fulfill that she had to finish before the year was over. And so after their honeymoon, she went back to Fillmore and my father went up to Star Valley. And I remember her telling me that she was so miserable being without him that the principal made her leave early and she was able to join him up in Star Valley, Wyoming. She was able to teach school up there also, and then she started having her family, and she had my two big brothers. Then I was born, and I have two younger sisters. When she was pregnant with my second brother, she became ill with rheumatic fever, and that changed her life. She tells the story that the doctors wanted her to abort my brother, but she refused to do so and went ahead and he was born. Then I was born, and then my sister, just younger than me by a year, was born. And when she got pregnant with my last little sister, her body had failed her. Her heart valve had gone bad. She had, with the rheumatic fever, contacted a incurable lung disease, which affected the outside linings of her lungs. And she had those things when I was born, when my other little sister was born. But when my baby sister was, when she was pregnant with my baby sister, she suffered congestive heart failure. And as a little girl, I remember my mother had to lay in bed. I just remember her being in bed. My grandma lived downstairs and was able to help us a lot. And we had left the farm by that time and were living in Murray, Utah. And the doctors told my mother that she would die when the baby was born, and they again suggested that she go through an abortion. there was a little doctor, she told me, that was from the Orient somewhere, and he felt that the abortion would be just as hard on her as birth would be. And so he told them, why not just let her live as long as she can? And so they allowed her to stay pregnant, but they felt like she would die when the baby was born. She was put in the hospital before my little sister was born. She was put in, not in a maternity ward, but she was put in a heart area, and she tells the story that everyone around her died on the day that she went into labor with my little sister. She says that a miracle happened. She could not feel the contractions. She could tell that her stomach was hardening, but there was no pain. They called the doctor, and he came in and said that she was in labor, but it would probably take a long time, so he would be back in a while. And he walked out the door, and my mother turned to my father and said, go get him, the baby's coming right now. And sure enough, the baby came, totally painless birth, and my mother survived. We as children at the time weren't allowed to go and see my mother. She was in a hospital, and so we weren't able to go in the hospital in those days, but we would wave at her. I don't know if my parents had told us that there was a possibility of her dying, but I know that we felt a lot of fear and loneliness when my mother was gone. After the baby was born, she was able to have an open heart surgery, and the valve in her heart was replaced. And it was only a few weeks later that my mother went with us to climb to Timpanogos Cave. So her health did return in many ways, but she was always because she had the medicines that she was on, because she had so much of the disease that she couldn't get rid of in her lungs. There were times when my mother would be rushed out to the doctor in Salt Lake. She would only go to the doctor who gave her the open heart surgery because nobody else would understand her condition. And if she went to regular doctors, they always wanted to admit her into the hospital. One of the things we found through the years was that my mother was able to teach school and do very well when she was on a very regular working schedule. She did very well health-wise. When she was out in the gardens, when the summertime came, her health wasn't as good because she would push herself. So teaching was a very good way for my mother to be able to be active and accomplish a great many things and still deal with the repercussions of her illness. My father went back to school and got his degree when he was 40 to become a teacher, and the first place that he got a job was in Duchesne, Utah, and that's when my family came out to the Uinta Basin. We lived in Duchesne for 2 years, and then we moved to Vernal in 1964. And from that time until she suffered a stroke in the early 80s, she taught school at Uinta High School as a home economics teacher. And there may be many of you that will remember her, and a lot that have no idea who she is. I was talking to Renee Steele, the home economics teacher at the UN High School, who teaches all the quilt classes that the girls come and display here at the museum. And she has great fond memories of my mother as she learned how to sew from my mom. And I think of how my mother's ability to teach how to sew has been played forward to today, and how many girls in the Vernal, Utah area have been blessed by Renee's classes and how she played forward what she learned from my mother. My mother suffered a stroke while she was still teaching school and had to retire. And she passed away on the 4th of November of 1986. I wasn't living in Vernal at the time, and I'd been away from my mom since about 74. But she will always be a courageous woman to me. I was so grateful for her strength, for her ability to go forward, even though she had health issues, for her love of family and of her community, of the girls that she taught to sew. I just wanted to show you a couple more pictures of her as a teacher here in this area. This is a picture of my mother, and actually my father was also a high school teacher here at Uinta High School. These are the teachers that were teaching the vocational type classes that year, and those are my parents. That's one of the ways she looked through the years. I remember this was one of my favorite pictures of her as a school teacher. I always thought she looked so nice in that picture. And the one that would probably be more recognizable to most people in the Vernal area would be this picture. We are so grateful for the teachers who teach students in the Uinta School District area, and for all of their and to give us wonderful information that helps us to grow to be accomplished people. We'd like to thank all the teachers in our area that are struggling through this pandemic time, trying to learn how to teach in a new way. And we wish all you mothers a very happy Mother's Day. We'll see you next week.